8:30. In the story of how classical music came to television and flowered in the last half-century, Humphrey Burton is a name that stands out. He is one of the leaders of a generation of innovators from the 1960s on who are passionate about bringing music to a mass audience. At the age of 90, he's now written the story of those years, In My Own Time. Our special correspondent James Naughty has been talking to Humphrey Burton, and they touched on one musician who you know particularly well, the composer, conductor and educator Leonard Bernstein.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and bright.
He was an inspiration and a storyteller. His parents and his grandfather, I think, were religious. I think his grandfather being a rabbi, and he was rabbinical in his desire to teach and to spread the word. He got this job running an American television program called Omnibus, and when I met him, his personality and his style was so charming and so totally committed. He said, come see me when you're in New York, and I did. And then later when I asked him back to come to television, and we did a series with him. This was a series of symphony concerts with the London Symphony Orchestra. He wanted to play music which was, he thought, dying. He thought the symphony was on its way out.
It led to a long friendship.
I got a phone call one day from Gregory Peck. This is Gregory Peck. Mr. Burton, we'd like you to become the director of our new project to put all Mr. Bernstein's concerts onto film. It was realized that film, in the form of cassettes, could become a home entertainment.
Apart from the consummate musician, he was a showman.
He couldn't help being a showman. He loved being a showman. He became a very fine conductor, and his performances, when he got really excited, he really took off. He was a marvelous man.
All this had started at the BBC in the 60s, when the outlook of the bosses was confident and unapologetic.
Our programme tonight is about two men. The one, Leonard Bernstein, the other, Paddy Chayefsky.
I believe that they felt that the BBC was absolutely the paramount instrument of education in the land. I think they took Reith's principles that the duty was to inform and educate and entertain. They defined undoubtedly that there was an educational purpose which shouldn't be hidden.
Television for grown-ups.
It was television for grown-ups, you're quite right.
And years later, after he'd made a sojourn to ITV at the birth of London weekend television, back at the BBC, Burton came up with another idea that would last.
The BBC Young Musician of the Year is what it was originally called. It all happened because the Leeds piano competition one year was very exciting, but all the soloists were from abroad. I can remember tearing my hair out. Why can't we get more British? And I had to say, what? Let's do our own competition and make sure that only British young musicians can take part.
Hello and welcome to the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester.
And in the early days, the final of the competition, with each musician performing a complete concerto, was shown live in prime time on a Saturday night.
I love Bach and Chopin and French music. I love very much.
Let's talk a little bit about each of the pieces you played. The Chopin Barcarolle.
Looking back on it, the most important thing was the complete refusal to cut corners. One had to explain everything. One had to teach the musicians on their own level and teach the judges at their level. And that meant one had to go along with the decisions and encourage the musicians to feel that they had done something really useful. I'm very proud of a young musician because it brought so many talented people onto the screen.
And in the story of a life in music, there are always the films. With Benjamin Britten in the 60s, bringing to life the first complete studio recording of Wagner's Ring Cycle under George Solti. And, of course, with Bernstein. As with the documentary on the filming of West Side Story, with the composer conducting in the 1980s.
And with Bernstein, it was so exciting because he kept saying, this is wonderful music.
And he'd written it.
He'd written it. At the end of every take, he says, that has to be my favourite piece in the show.
And the operatic tenor Jose Carreras got into that dangerous business, an argument with Bernstein.
He was playing one of the gang. He should have been able to sing in good American English.
But he couldn't.
But he couldn't all that well. But the dramatic scene in that film is the moment when he like a great racehorse, refuses to take the jump. The jump
to the top B flat in Maria.
To the top B flat in Maria. Just let it go, Maria.
And he couldn't do it.
He'd arranged that he would do it at the beginning of another day, when his voice was absolutely clear. But nobody had told Bernstein, and nobody had told me. When we got to that moment, he just dried up.
Humphrey Burton went on to write Bernstein's biography, but he's still, at 90, most passionate, as he's always been, about what television can do.
I put on highlights. I'd go through the archive and fish out highlights from the past, and I'd make more new highlights, which really had people talking. Did you see that last night? Wasn't that fantastic? That's what I want to see more of.
Humphrey Burton, thank you very much.
And that was Jim Naughtie reporting for us. 28 minutes past 8 to the Sport and Simon.
Tough to follow that, but I'll try.